Last year, Teksteditions found a wonderful and marvelous new voice in Joshua James. And who could forget those diabolical hand puppets? This year we have done the same. We have found an unheard voice and read a manuscript that we felt had to be published. It's called Invisible Foxes. And already he's got you going because we understand foxes. But invisible? Are they here? Are they there? Are they in your mind? Are they in the background lawn of your internet use? What we have here is a bright, young, bubbling over voice, and you're going to need a towel. There are eat your heart out descriptions of a fall evening in constructed hammers. You will find how a video store clerk has relieved her boredom. You're going to even meet Jack Layton again, and there are permutations of the color orange. I'd like you to welcome Eddie tonight. It's his debut. It's his first ever public reading of one of his narratives. And he's hot. Eddie Mumford.
That was great. That was better than I'm going to be, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so tonight, as Brian said, I'm going to be reading from my first book. It's called Invisible Foxes. Double check. Yeah. Invisible Foxes. It's got kind of a hybrid style between short stories and novel. And so there's lots of moving pieces that don't always intersect right away. And so I figured I would read two passages so that you can get a feeling of how things differ. But I didn't want to get into anything too much mayhem, but I can promise you there's rape, drugs, murder, and intrigue. We got it all, kids. But I decided to pick something lighter and more fun to read because, you know, I'm up here too. All right, so the first thing I'm going to read is from the first chapter. The first chapter is called Oyster and the Giant, and it follows Dr. Archie. And Dr. Archie spends every lunch hour at his favorite strip club, the Ruby Oyster, where he eats at his favorite buffet. And more recently, he's become enamored with a very special stripper, a gypsy named Sonia, whom he's never seen dance, but he becomes intrigued by her when he notices that she's the only one willing to eat at the buffet. So this is the fourth time he's meeting her. There was an editorial in a magazine they don't publish anymore, all about the news story. The next catchy holocaust that would make the human race come together, shake hands with itself, and work united for the circle jerk of greater good. It was supposed to be the fight to save the Earth's ecology. It was the next world war, is what it said. But it was mostly hog shit. When the world starts ending, the rapists were gonna rape, and the looters were gonna loot, as the world's priorities switch over completely to self-preservation and getting a good fuck in. The world will enslave itself the way it always does, with or without a Holocaust. Would you like another drink? Sure. And what about your friend? He'll have water. I want bourbon! Bernard spat. Just water, thanks. The stupid waitress wouldn't stop eyeballing Bernard's oxygen tank, like she'd never seen one before. Thank you, I rang, and she finally walked off. Athlete's foot is the most common form of ringworm. It's also the most benign if you treat it properly. Yeast in this beer isn't helping, but you know how it is with some things. I didn't care if Bernard was listening. I was really just mumbling to myself. The dancing oyster on my napkin was staring back at me from above her red lips and long legs. If there was a pearl anywhere, it was buried deep. Sonia! I saw her from across the club, but she couldn't hear me over the music. Bernard was forgotten for a moment. I didn't excuse myself, I just leapt up towards her, toes first. And there we were again, at our buffet. Hey, hi, how are you? I'm here with one of my patients today. Yeah, he's over there. He's not much for the buffet, though. Sonia stretched sideways at the waist, looking behind me, curling the lovely bruise of her purple lips. Look sick. Oh, he is terribly sick. Are you sure he should be being here? Trust me, I'm a doctor. And this is Fantasyland, remember? We both watched Bernard slip one of my 20s between the white tits of a girl in her 20s. He's having a great time. But Sonia continued to stare. And I knew what she was thinking, too. It was like looking disease in the face from across a strip club. It made me think, do you think the next world war might start between people and flowers? Sonia straightened up and took back the air she'd squeezed. Are the trees to be fighting also? Bernard, the old sack, was dancing with a girl. He seemed to be through with self-preservation and was ready to get a good fuck in. Before his balls were dust. Achoo! Sonia smiled. No bluma in here, believe me, a check. Sonia? Yes, doctor? Your glands are swollen. But? Here, come here. She withdrew as I reached for her neck. Let me see. She retreated again, but only for a moment. Very slowly, she rested her chin down, sliding into my fingers. I held her head up, reviewing her neck, and I could feel her eyes watching my eyes on her. Well? Hey! But Sonia had already separated from me, waving the bouncer away again. I needed to put my fingers in her mouth. I needed to drive Bernard back to his car, and along the way he would tell me that he had a wonderful lunch. I didn't look over, but it sounded like he had started crying. He sobbed out how lucky he was to have no wife, nor any children that he was aware of, and I agreed, silently. I thought that was probably for the best, given Bernard's quality of life, or the quality of life that could be expected for his supposed children. I gave him $40 and a prescription for Thorazine, and he snipped up his snot and got out of my car, wheeling his tank behind him. My father would have called Bernard a weeping woman, or something along that line. Weak and small and too busy crying to make babies. Babies cry, he'd say. Babies and women. And Bernard certainly wasn't a woman. He was the picture of a corpse, gray and warped, like a sonogram. The next is from chapter 4, maybe? I forget the number. It's called No Hostages. And in this chapter, we're following a very special lady. Her name is Nancy Brooke. She refers to herself as Nancy the Sea Cow because she's very uncomfortable with how big she is, and self-deprecation is a defense mechanism. She is postmenopausal and recently divorced, and this chapter follows the day where she goes to get her flu shot. So I'll start somewhere in the middle. You're late, she said, after clicking endlessly at her terminal. I know, I'm sorry. I missed my stop. You'll have to wait here for another space to open up. Okay, well, how long does that usually take? This is flu season, ma'am. Yes, I know. So the doctor will see you when he can. Her eyes dropped below the rim of her glasses, and her fingers resumed their steady clacking. Turning around, I saw 4 possible seats. Potential infections. Everyone was either coughing or choking on their glottal parts. For some reason, this made me thirsty. After standing around uncomfortably for some time, I noticed a sleeping woman hunched over her armrest and a little boy sitting beside her. The boy was staring hard at the television mounting on the corner beside me. The woman had the hair and clothes of a girl in her 20s, and the smile lines from her 30s, I guessed. And she kept her purse wedged between her legs, grinding the contents in her sleep. The boy seemed healthy enough, and properly distracted by the program, so I sat beside him. I even tried to watch the show, but the screen was very small, and my nearsightedness hadn't cleared itself up on my walk. Are you sick? His voice was small but clear. I knew straight away that he was talking to me. No, I said, still squinting at the television. Me neither, really. I'm just here for a shot. He said it all rather casually. I figured most kids his age would have been afraid of needles. Me too, I said, looking down. His face seemed curious and very large when compared with the rest of him. I'm not scared of shots, he said. Never said you were. I started rooting around in my purse for some kind of valid distraction. I found my phone. No missed calls. Do you know what a pimp is? I stared at my phone. My sister got stabbed by a pimp for no reason, but she's okay now. Blood burned in the tips of my cheeks. I'm sure he could see my face was flushing. And now I gotta get a tennis shot, but I don't know why. Unless it's for when I get stabbed for no reason. His voice wasn't upset or nervous, and I was becoming both. I seriously doubt that's why you're here. But that made his face tense, like he wanted to disagree with me. He didn't speak. Who would stab you for no reason? I said, wishing I'd said something more comforting as I twisted my head around to make sure we were far enough away from anything conscious. You know what a pimp is, right? I didn't answer him. I stared uncomfortably between him and the sleeping woman. It's a bad criminal, he said finally. That's right, I said, untightening the grin or grimace he'd induced. You never know when one is going to come out and stab you for no reason. No, I guess you don't, I agreed, again, wishing that I had some kind of comforting explanation for human behavior, or a video game to show him on my cell phone. The woman beside him shuffled, and I found myself scanning her body for knife wounds and cigarette burns. Do you have any kids? He looked me up and down, probably looking for tusks. Yes, I have a daughter, but she's not really a kid anymore. He was tapping his fingers at different rhythms on the armrest between us. So she's a grown-up? Ha! I had. I wouldn't say that. The fingers stopped tapping. He stared at his hands. You see, she never really grew up, I guess you could say. But I'd say that she became an adult after she started telling me when to buy my groceries, or when I should pay my hydro bill, like I'm old and foolish already. He looked left and right a few times, thinking things over. His eyes made looking at nothing seem focused and busying. So she's like a big baby, he said slowly. But she's your baby, right? There was a hopefulness in his voice that I didn't pick up on right away. I guess. We never really warmed to each other. My heels were shaking left and right beneath my chair. Never really got comfortable, you know? Yeah, that's like me and Andre. Who's Andre? He's my mom's friend. He thinks I'm a smart Alex. Are you? No, don't even say that! He looked right up at me and his eyes shrank into little blurry dots. Sorry, I hadn't meant to hurt his feelings. I got caught up in your questioning. The woman beside him let out a snuff of air and licked her lips. It's okay, he said in a normal tone. I'm sorry about your baby. Yeah, me too. His little sneakers were swinging faster. The Velcro strips made unpleasant little scratching noises when his ankles would cross. Some parents make it out like their kids are their whole world, but I don't even think I wanted children, you know? It was important to my husband, though, I think. Was my husband. Was. He stopped swinging, and his eyes stayed fixed, staring ahead, right into the dark blue fabric of another chair. My dad doesn't want me either, he said almost plainly. The words had jumped into the vein on my neck, shooting twitches at my face. I felt like a monster, which is so much worse than a walrus. But what about your mom? She looks nice. He turned back for a second and smiled to himself. That's my Auntie Abby. He whispered her name like it was forbidden. So where's your mom? I regretted the question instantly. But he just pushed out his bottom lip and shrugged. I wasn't going to press him on it. Are you getting a tennis shot? Well, I've never really had the elbows for tennis, I chuckled. I don't know what kind of reaction I was expecting, but I felt stupid when he started rubbing his arm between his elbow and shoulder. I could sense the memory of the needle, pricking a little. I sighed and crooked my head down, waiting for his eyes. You know what? He seemed interested with my tone. I bet that when you go home, you'll be ready for every pimp out there. They're all pricks anyways.
Thank you, Eddie. Wonderful reading. We're going going to take a 15-minute break, lots of books, have something to drink.
Yeah!